What's up? I'm Clay Travis. This is OutKick the show. Appreciate all of you hanging out with me. Monday edition of the program. Get your popcorn. We got a lot to dive into. And let's start with a story that erupted on Friday afternoon after I had already finished all my shows for the day. And let me see how many people have read this latest tweet. It's me versus the WNBA. Not even trying to pick fights here. I'm just going about my day, getting ready for Halloween, chilling, kicking back. Let's see. Nearly 9 million people have read this tweet that I'm about to read for you. But let me kind of give you a background on how the WNBA Boys High School Challenge, the $1 million challenge that I've put in place happened. So earlier this week, a clip of me from back in February started to go viral. Somebody, give him credit, runs a basketball site, found me saying what is indisputably true, in my always humble opinion. A good boys high school state champion team would smoke, in my opinion, the WNBA champion. At this time, I didn't even know who the WNBA champion was. I probably wouldn't have known who the WNBA champion was anyway. But it was in February, and I was talking about how ESPN is doing everything they can to make it seem like people care about the WNBA, when the reality is, after 25 years, nobody cares about the WNBA. And I said, look, one of the reasons is because the women would get smoked by a good high school boys team. So that gets clipped, starts to go viral, and evidently one of the Las Vegas Aces, I don't know who she is, I don't know what her background is, but her name is Chelsea Gray. She shared this clip from the Hoop Herald, and she called me a dumbass. And so I didn't even know that this had happened until I saw it on a Google News alert, because I can't keep up with everything everybody says on a day-to-day basis. But Chelsea Gray called me a dumbass. She's on the Las Vegas Aces, which is the WNBA champion. So I responded, and to my knowledge, Chelsea Gray has not responded, nor has the WNBA, nor has the Las Vegas Aces. But my challenge is clear. We're going to clip this, and we will put it out there. Here's what I tweeted. I'll put $1 million on the line. Your WNBA champion team, that's the Las Vegas Aces, against a 2024 high school boys state champion team of my choice. You guys win. You get $1 million of my money. That is $1 million that I will put out there. I will give it directly to all the members of the Las Vegas Aces. You potentially would make more money from this one game against the boys' high school team than you do for virtually the entire season playing in the WNBA. You claim that you're wildly underpaid. $1 million on the table of my money. But if you lose, you give me $1 million. I then will not keep that money because I'm fortunate to have $100 million already. Instead, I will give that money to the high school boys team that beat you, that I believe would beat you, as incentive to the boys team to go out and play. So all of those high school boys state champions would get, nearly $100K each. That offer is out there. You called me a dumbass. You're a member of the WNBA championship team. I'm putting my money exactly where my mouth is. You can agree or disagree with me on all sorts of issues under the sun. I put my money where my mouth is. Sometimes it means I lose money. Most of the time, it means I make money. That's why I'm a 100 millionaire. Used to not have much money. Now I'm rich. I can put $1 million down on this game. Now, on top of that, let me take it to the next level. I think that this game would be the most watched game in the history of the WNBA. That is, more people would watch the high school boys team that I picked, the state champion team, would watch them play against the WNBA team than has ever watched a WNBA game in the 25-year history of the WNBA. Money out there, attention out there, next level. We will sell the video rights either on pay-per-view or to a broadcast partner, and I think we would do tens of millions of dollars in additional revenue. The vast majority of those funds I would donate to charity. Now, I'd have to keep some of them because we have to cover our costs. But that is how much I am willing to do to make this happen. $1 million on the line. I will bring $1 million in cash into the arena, and I will stack it right on the side with some security. And as soon as that game is over, the winning team will get $1 million in cash. Boom. You get the dollars right there. We're not doing the big oversized check. Literally, I will give you $1 million of my money in cash. I want the $1 million of your money on the other sideline. And when my boys state champion teams kicks the crap out of the WNBA champion, I want the $1 million rolled right across to me, and I will then hand the $1 million to my boys. And then I'll keep the $1 million that I already had. We'll probably raise tens of millions of dollars for charity, and my overall point will be made, which is boys shouldn't be competing in women's athletics because boys are bigger, stronger, and faster, even high school boys, than grown women who are the best at playing their sport. Now, some people are like, oh, this is disrespectful. No, it's not. I could be wrong. If you think that I'm wrong, put the $1 million out there, show up, man up, woman up, prove I'm wrong, and then trash talk me. And then tell me that I'm an imbecile. Tell me that I'm a dumbass. Tell me that running my big mouth cost me $1 million. I'm putting my money where the mouth is. WNBA won't say a word. The Las Vegas Aces won't say a word. I would have never even put this $1 million out there if one of your players hadn't called me a dumbass. My money is where my mouth is. Is yours? I don't think so. All I'm offering is the most watched WNBA game of all time and an opportunity to prove me wrong once and for all and take $1 million of my own money. It's not coming from anybody else. You can go with me to the bank and watch me withdraw it and watch me load it up and drive it right to the arena. I'll be there smoking a big fat cigar after my boys whip your ass and get $1 million. Where are you? Put your money where your mouth is, WNBA. Put your money where your mouth is, Las Vegas Aces. Your boy just did it. Will y'all? Ball, quite literally, is in your court. Let's make it happen. All right. Bunch of college football games over the weekend. All right. What do we learn? First, congrats to Kansas. They had not beaten Oklahoma since 1997. They hadn't won against Oklahoma in Lawrence, Kansas, I believe the reality is, ever. They had not won a top 10 game in Lawrence, Kansas since 1984. Congratulations, Lance Leipold, for the big win. You won't probably be in Kansas very long, but this was a big, monumental win that I think is making it less and less likely. I think Oklahoma's going to, early preview, I think Oklahoma's going to lose to Oklahoma State next weekend, or this weekend, Saturday, in what might well be the final version of Bedlam that we see for some time because Oklahoma's going to the SEC. Oklahoma State should still continue, in my opinion, because it's one of the best rivalries inside of a state that exists anywhere in college football. I think it should be preserved for years and years into the future, just my personal opinion. But I think Oklahoma State's going to beat Oklahoma. And I'm not sure with the Quinn Ewers injury, even though Texas went out and beat BYU, I'm not sure that Texas can keep things rolling either. I would bet now, if I had to, on the Big 12 not getting a team into the playoff. What other games of note took place over the weekend? Oregon. My goodness. That might be the single most impressive victory of the season by any team. Oregon trounced Utah on the road at Utah 35-6. Game wasn't remotely close I do believe it's the most impressive win that any team has put forward so far this season. Ohio State at Notre Dame, solid win on the last play of the game. Ohio State against Penn State, solid win, although it was relatively close. So Ohio State's got 2 good wins. FSU, Florida State with the big win over LSU. Texas with the win over Alabama. That's probably the 4. Oklahoma with the win over Texas. That's probably the 5 biggest wins that you would point to of the college football season so far in terms of teams that would hope to contend for a championship. I think the biggest and most impressive win so far this season is what Oregon did to Utah. Because we know Utah's good. We know Kyle Whittingham has got a hell of a program that he has built at Utah, and that you don't go in very often into Rice-Eccles Stadium and walk out as a winner. Ask what happened to the Florida Gators week 1 of the season, that opening Thursday night game when they got thoroughly trounced, even with backup quarterbacks for Utah. I think Oregon and Dan Lanning, the most impressive win of the season so far, and for a title contender. Virginia, for instance, beating North Carolina was pretty impressive, given how much of an underdog they were. Let me also say this. I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12. Now, some of you are going to be going crazy. What are you talking about, Clay? Why in the world? No, I think Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12. And I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, even though they lost on the road at Washington. And if you are a Pac-12 fan, I think you probably are hoping for a rematch of Oregon and Washington, with the winner being likely to go to the college football playoff, which is why I'm now putting Oregon in to the teams that I expect to make the college football playoff. Before the season started, I gave you 4 teams. I said that I thought Georgia, that I thought Florida State, Michigan, and USC would be the 4 college football playoff teams. The team that I am now not confident in, even though USC came back to win 50-49, withstood a 2-point conversion attempt, the team that I am not confident in the most is USC. I bumped them out. I now think Oregon will win the Pac-12. And so the only change to my predictions of who I think will be in the playoff, even as we're about to enter November, is I would replace USC with Oregon, which I think is the best team right now in the Pac-12. Also, as we look at the overall landscape of college football, big win for Tennessee over Kentucky. Now, some of you out there are going to say, why do anybody care, Tennessee over Kentucky? This was, I think, Josh Heupel proving, and the win over Texas A&M helped this as well, even after the poor second half at Alabama. Last year was not a flash in the pan. We're never going to be able to replicate it. Josh Heupel's building a top 15, top 10 style program at Tennessee. And if you look at what's going on right now with Josh Heupel, 11-2 last year, now back at 6-2, 17-4 in his last 21 games. Not very many college teams can point to that. Tennessee will beat UConn this weekend, and then be sitting at 18-4 in the last 22, if my math is correct, which I think it is. And then you look at what happens next. Go to Mizzou. Should be interesting. My prediction, we'll talk about Georgia in a sec against the Florida. My prediction has been for a while that Tennessee is going to upset Georgia on November 18th in Neyland. Will probably be the toughest game of the year, at least on the schedule for preseason, and I think proven to be the case so far. We'll see how Georgia does this weekend against Missouri and how Georgia does next weekend against Ole Miss. But I think November 18th in Knoxville, Tennessee beats Georgia, and that Josh Heupel's team wins 9 or 10 games in 2023, coming off of a 10-win regular season in 2022. Therefore, it is not some flash-in-the-pan, unexpected outcome. That would be what my prediction would be going forward. I bet on Florida. Florida Gator fans have been saying, Clay, you haven't been respecting us enough. Are you not paying attention? We've looked pretty good. Well, Georgia, even without Brock Bowers, absolutely obliterated the Florida Gators. I had Florida plus 14.5. After that first touchdown drive, it looked like a bad bet for a long time. Georgia completely destroyed Florida. And Georgia, right now, if I look at my landscape of top teams, I have bumped Michigan up to number 1. A few weeks ago I did. I've got Georgia 2. I've got Florida State 3. Let me give you all of my top 10 right now, and you will be able to see, I think, the super most rational analysis of the top teams. Let me also say this. Penn State, to me, disappointing what they were able to accomplish here. They should have been better. They should have been better at that game against Indiana. I'm disappointed that they weren't. And let me make sure I got that article up here just a sec. But so my top 3 is, I think, a pretty solid top 3. Again, Michigan 1, Georgia 2. In the 3rd spot right now, I've got Florida State. And if you actually start to work through all of this, then to me, it's not particularly difficult to have Ohio State 4. I've dropped Penn State out of my top 10 because I just don't think that they belong there. And as you break all of this down, in the 5 spot, we start to get a little bit of uncertainty as to which team should be there. And by the way, I'm going to talk about this Michigan situation that everybody seems to be obsessed with. Wall Street Journal reporting Jim Harbaugh didn't get an extension that they had been working on. I'll kind of break all that down for you. But to me right now in the OutKick top 10, it is not remotely difficult. In the 5 spot, Washington. I told you that I like Oregon more than Washington because Oregon's coming off the most impressive win of the year, in my opinion, against Utah. Washington wasn't very good last week. They could have lost. They weren't very good this weekend against Stanford. I think Washington just kind of getting a little bit wobbly. I've got Oklahoma at 7, even though I think Texas is playing better than Oklahoma is right now. I've got Bama at 9, and I've got Ole Miss at 10. When it comes to Michigan, let me talk about Michigan for a minute. Everybody's all obsessed. Wall Street Journal said that they've dialed back the idea of giving Jim Harbaugh a long-term extension at Michigan, that they basically pulled that off to see what's going to happen with all of the allegations about scouting. Some people are saying, oh, Michigan shouldn't be allowed to play in the Big Ten title game. Oh, Michigan shouldn't be allowed to make the playoff. I think you have to take the emotion out of it. To me, this is a somewhat analogous, roughly, situation to what happened to Auburn in 2011 when Auburn won the national championship with Cam Newton. What do I mean by that? Auburn basically said, we dare you to prove it, and they kept playing Cam Newton all season long. What is not going to happen, in my opinion, is Michigan is not going to voluntarily pull itself out of title contention. Michigan last won a title, and it was only half a title, in 1997. That year, they split the championship with Nebraska. That was the Charles Woodson, Brian Griese era for the Michigan Wolverines. Right now, Michigan is sitting at 8-0. They're going to smoke Purdue this weekend. Then they go on the road at Penn State. Then they close out the season with Ohio State and Ann Arbor. There is no way that anyone in a position of authority at Michigan is undertaking any action, in my opinion, that undercuts Michigan's ability to win a national championship. Why? Do you want to be the president of a university at Michigan who undercuts Michigan's best title chance in 25 years? Would you ever be able to keep your job? I think the answer is no. So there's only 3 actors that can do something. 1 is Michigan. 2 is the Big Ten. Big Ten has a brand new commissioner, Tony Petitti, I think is his name, or Petitti. I'm not sure how you even pronounce his last name because he's brand new. I don't know him personally. Let me tell you what I do know. The Big Ten commissioner is not going to put his job on the line in year 1 as Big Ten commissioner by eliminating one of the 2 premier programs in his entire conference from an opportunity to compete for a national championship. Big Ten's not doing anything. Michigan's not doing anything. The NCAA is impotent, and it takes them years to undertake any action. So the NCAA is not going to do anything. If they tried to do something, Michigan would immediately go and get an injunction against the NCAA being able to enforce anything during the season. Maybe I'm wrong. Can any of you point me to a high-level championship contending team that got a punishment during the middle of their championship contending run that took them out of title contention? I can't remember any. There are actions taken afterwards, right? The Fab Five, for instance. They took down the banners for the Fab Five. It took years and years for that to happen. So I'm not saying there might not be an argument against some sort of punishment or even a punishment against Michigan that might come in the years ahead. I don't think it's going to happen right now. The NCAA impotent, powerless, and also there would be an injunction. Immediately, the University of Michigan football team would go to court to get a temporary restraining order against any significant penalty that was attempted to be levied during the season. And by the way, I think they would get it, because if they are later found to be innocent, there would be a substantial injury to Michigan's team because their chances to compete for a championship would be diminished. And I think in an NIL era, you can even argue that contractually these players have an obligation to be able to fulfill the terms of their contract. I think there's a lot of interesting angles. This thing would unite Democrat and Republican politicians in the state of Michigan. There is just no way on the planet, in my opinion, that Michigan, that the Big Ten, or the NCAA are going to do anything. If I were advising Michigan, I would say follow the Auburn model, full speed ahead, say you did nothing wrong, and dare someone to prove to the contrary that you violated an NCAA rule that requires there to be an action taken against you. If I were Jim Harbaugh, I would claim that I didn't know anything about this. And then, look, I think there's a good chance that Jim Harbaugh is riding off into the sunset and becoming an NFL coach right after this season ends. If he ends it with a third straight win over Ohio State and also with another playoff appearance, more power to him. It'd be hard to argue that he didn't create a super successful program at Michigan if those were the terms he left on. Let me also point this out, because I do think it's significant as you analyze this overall situation that's in play right now. Why would anyone, again, if you look at the NCAA, if you look at the Big Ten, and if you look at Michigan, the best case scenario for all of them is that Michigan loses. But I actually think if I were Jim Harbaugh, I would use this as evidence of all the world being against us. That's what Auburn did during the Cam Newton story. They convinced their team, I think accurately, that everybody hated them and that the whole world was against them. And they had a transcendent talent at college football quarterback, Cam Newton, who played unbelievably well, was mentally tough, and seemed to genuinely love making his detractors miserable. I was at the game where Auburn came back from, I believe it was a 24-0 deficit, and won on the road in Tuscaloosa. That was against Nick Saban and a Nick Saban defense. To have the ability to come back and win that game after being down 24 points is one of the most impressive comebacks I've ever seen in my life. I think it was fueled by hate. Why wouldn't Michigan take that fuel and use it going forward? I don't think anything's going to happen to them. I think this could even strengthen the Wolverines in their games coming up, because most of the time coaches are desperately looking for disrespect. Remember last year Kirby claimed that somebody said Georgia was going to go 7-5? I never saw anybody claim that, but he convinced his team that somebody said it and that nobody expected him to be any good. Nick Saban's been trying to convince his team for 20 years that nobody respects Alabama, even though Alabama's favored in almost every game they ever play. This, to me, is potentially not only not something that's going to derail this season, I think it's something that could bring more positivity to Michigan. All right. Colorado potentially got robbed in the Rose Bowl. things, again, these are allegations, but things in L.A. are out of control when Colorado was playing UCLA and there are allegations that a bunch of stuff was stolen from the locker room. And I saw this story and I was like, yeah, I can see that. And I bet a lot of you also thought, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that L.A. is filled with so much thievery now that even if you're going to play a college football game, your locker room isn't safe during the game. You could end up getting robbed. Mike Pence has dropped out of, I'll talk more about Mike Pence tomorrow because I'm seeing down. I've got to do Riley Gaines' podcast coming up here in a few minutes. A couple of other things that I want to hit. I'll give you my take on Mike Pence. I'll give you my take on Glenn Youngkin, Eventbrite, and more. I do want to say this, though. Patrick Mahomes played yesterday, and he had the flu. He had to get a ton of IVs. He didn't play particularly well. I know we don't talk a lot about the NFL usually on Monday, but I did want to mention this because I think it's significant. How many people out there have you seen online saying it's unacceptable for Patrick Mahomes to play an NFL game while sick with the flu, as he just did yesterday? Maybe I missed it. I haven't seen anybody, right? Because the general consensus for generations has been that if you're an athlete, you get an IV, you suck it up, you try to go out and play. And if you play at a high level, we lionize the player like still exists for the Michael Jordan flu game 25 years or some such after that alleged flu game happened. In fact, what we usually argue about with the flu game is, did Michael Jordan really have the flu? Was he hungover? Was it food poisoning? What was causing Jordan to play at such a certainly less than ideal state in that game? Okay? The Jordan flu game helped to make Jordan the legend that he is today. Patrick Mahomes didn't play as well, but remember, he had the flu. And we've spent the past couple of years with left-wing lunatics in sports media and otherwise arguing that if you tested positive for COVID, which is basically a cold, it's actually less significant of an illness than the flu, particularly if you're young and healthy, that you had to isolate and that you potentially had to miss weeks of being able to play in the NFL. We had everybody wearing masks. We had guys being told they weren't allowed to play barely. They had to get tested all the time if they refused to get the COVID shot. They were ridiculed. Anybody who refused to get the COVID shot. Now, all of a sudden, we're just pretending that didn't happen? Because the flu, and look, this is the position that I've had for a long time. If you think you can go to work, but you don't feel well, but it's important that you be there, you should go to work. I take pride in, I'm not claiming that my job is insanely difficult, but I've never missed a radio show for being sick in my entire life. I don't think that I've ever missed a television show for being sick in my entire life. Now, I've taken vacations, but I've never called in sick for any of the media that I do. I don't even know what the plan was when I got up every morning at 4:20 a.m. to be live on my morning nationwide radio show solo for 5 some odd years. I never missed a game. Never missed a show. I take pride in that. Doesn't mean that I was always 100% healthy. Means that sometimes I felt like crap, but I felt an obligation to go out and put forward the best effort that I could because I have the kind of job where if I'm not there, people notice. Now, again, I take vacations. I enjoy being on the road with my kids. I'm not going to apologize for that. But if I'm present, I've never had a sick day in my media career. Again, doesn't mean I haven't been sick. Doesn't mean I haven't not felt well, but I've shown up and worked. I think that should be the precedent. If you have a job where people rely on you being there, you should show up and do it. And certainly I'm also fortunate that most of the time I have home studios so I can work from home. It's not like I have to go out and be in front of 100 people. Now, I have gone and done television sick a few times at Fox Sports where I didn't feel great. I remember one show I finished, went home, immediately got underneath the covers and threw up like 6 times. I remember once when I was doing 104.5 The Zone, a solo show, I threw up during a commercial break, finished the show, got home, had chills, fever, everything else. Partly it's timing. I'm not saying that I would never take off, but I've always been able to do the job, okay? So I think that should be the standard. Why are all these people who said that you shouldn't be able to play because you were COVID positive, why did they say nothing about Patrick Mahomes playing with the flu? Why haven't they come out and acknowledged, you know what, in retrospect, we were totally wrong to make all those demands about guys being tested all the time for COVID and being forced to sit out? I didn't see anybody say this was an unacceptable risk. What about the officials? What about the coaches? What about all the people Patrick Mahomes could get sick? I didn't see anybody talk about it. So why did we give up my entire life as a sports fan? Again, Jordan was iconically famous partly for what we still call the Jordan flu game. Why did we suddenly give that up for the BS of COVID for a couple of years? And now we're going to go right back to the Jordan flu game era and pretend that this COVID insanity never happened? No, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I think there should be consequences. I think we should all talk about it. Speaking of talk about it, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow because usually we do the NFL on Tuesday. But I took my family, my 3 boys. Also, we had Kelly Stewart. I'll do the gambling show with Kelly on Thursday. Good week of gambling, by the way. 5-2 in the NFL, 6-5 in college football. Kelly Stewart, Ariel Epstein were in town. We had 7 people riding to the Titans game. All 3 of my boys, wife, Ariel, and Kelly. Will Levis was unbelievable. 4 touchdown passes. Now, I saw Marcus Mariota throw 5 touchdown passes in his debut, so a little bit of tempered optimism here. But Will Levis looked phenomenal in his starting game for the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow, but I just wanted to mention anybody with a functional brain knew that Will Levis, beyond a shadow of a doubt, was going to be incredible in the NFL. And evidently in this case, I am one of those people without a functional brain because I thought he was going to be a disaster. Maybe he still will. But the one thing you know about me is if my opinion's wrong and there's evidence to support that it's wrong, I will 100% acknowledge when I was wrong, and I'll totally switch paths. And right now, I hope I just saw the debut of a first ballot Hall of Fame career for Will Levis because I'd like for my team to be really good. We just had Governor Glenn Youngkin on the show. He announced that he and the state of Virginia were no longer going to be doing Eventbrite, using that because they won't allow Riley Gaines to advertise her events on Eventbrite because saying women's sports should be made up of women is evidently a super controversial opinion to have. I can't believe this is the world that we now live in, but evidently it is. And so I give credit to Governor Youngkin for refusing to stand for this absurdity. And I know I said I'd talk about it tomorrow, and I will in more detail, but Mike Pence has dropped out of the presidential race. I think it's the right decision. It's tough to step down. To me, there are 3 candidates, and then we just had Tim Scott on, so we'll see whether this changes. But to me, there are 3 candidates that have proven that they are going to be able to consistently get double-digit support as we come closer to the Iowa caucuses. Trump, certainly, Ron DeSantis, and also Nikki Haley. Outside of those 3, I think everybody else probably should be thinking about withdrawing from the race, seeing how those 3 go, see how Iowa goes, see how New Hampshire goes, and then potentially be head-to-head Trump v. either DeSantis or Nikki Haley by the time we get to that Iowa primary. All right. I love all of you. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. This is OutKick the show. I will see you guys tomorrow. WNBA, make it happen. $1 million. Las Vegas Aces versus a boys high school state champion team of my choice. Let's do it. This has been OutKick the show.